We know very well that we are made up of a soul, the neshama, and a body, the guf. The sages tell us that today the vast majority of souls, the neshamot, are recycled souls, meaning that they have already lived in the past, in other bodies. This is what is called Gilgulim, reincarnation. But is there anything scientific about all this? I remember that a friend from Boston used to call his 12-year-old son the idiot savant. He called him the idiot savant because he could play the piano like a pro without having taken a single lesson, while at school he was just an average student with nothing special. And one might wonder, how is it that so many people have special talents from birth? For example, they play an instrument, or they know how to paint or draw or speak foreign languages without any learning. Is it possible that these talents are due to what they learned in a previous life? Another interesting phenomenon that you and I have experienced several times in our lives is what we call déjà vu, where we feel a new experience as if we have already lived it. For example, we are in a place for the first time in our lives and we feel as if we have already been there in the past. Along the same lines, there are people who have completely unjustified fears from birth. For example, someone who is afraid of water, who has a phobia of water, maybe they drowned in a previous life. All these examples could indicate reincarnation, but from a scientific standpoint, they are far from being proof. There are two indicators that seem to me the closest to proof of reincarnation: regression under hypnosis and near-death experiences. We are going to analyze regression under hypnosis. By definition, hypnosis facilitates a return to an earlier stage of psychological development, meaning it helps a person go back into their past and reconnect with the situation they have experienced. They can therefore relive images, sounds, smells, or any other sensation. It's as if a person is completely reliving a situation they experienced in the past. What is fascinating is that patients have been regressed to situations prior to their current life, that is, to relive past lives. In several well-documented cases, patients have provided unknown historical details that turned out to be true, or have spoken foreign languages they did not know, even extinct dialects or dead languages. A fascinating example that is very well documented and also reported in the book The Revolution by Rabbi Zamir Cohen is that of the famous American actor Glenn Ford. His hypnosis sessions were recorded and analyzed by a team at the California University, UCLA. In his third hypnosis session, Glenn Ford ventures into his previous lives. There, he begins to speak with a Scottish accent and says that he was Charles Stuart, who lived at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th in Elgin, Scotland, where he taught music and had a sister, Eliza, who married young and moved to Edinburgh. He was passionate about horses and raised them in his stable. He said that he died young in 1812 at the age of 32 and was buried in the Protestant cemetery in Elgin next to the Baker family. At the end of the session, they played the recording for Glenn Ford. He is not surprised by the Scottish accent because as an actor, he knows how to imitate several accents. On the other hand, he was surprised that he was a musician because he had never studied music. The doctor then asks him to play the piano, and for a brief moment, he plays music by Chopin, Beethoven, and Mozart. He then asks a friend who was leaving for England to investigate this Charles Stuart. His friend reports back that he found the grave of Charles Stuart in the Protestant cemetery of Elgin with the date of death 1812. Glenn Ford then does a fourth session to go even further back into his previous lives. He feels that he is joining a previous life, but it's black and cannot be revealed. So the doctor asks him to go even further back. And then Glenn Ford begins to speak in a Parisian dialect from the 17th century. The actor says that he is in Versailles, there are many horses, and he says that he is responsible for the stable that is on the left side of the chateau. He says his name is Lanvaux, but does not want to reveal his first name. After the session, research showed that there was a Lanvaux who died in a duel in 1684. The only problem is that all the history books indicate that the stables at Versailles were not on the left side. It was only after examining a very old manuscript in Paris that it was shown that the Royal Guard stable was originally on the left side. A second fascinating example is that of Jane Evans, a Welsh housewife who agreed to be interviewed for British television by the BBC after being regressed to a past life by Dr. Arnold Bloxham, president of the British Society of Hypnotherapists and a respected practitioner. She had initially consulted him about her rheumatism and under hypnosis revealed 7 past lives, one of which was televised during the regression. She identified herself as a Jewish woman living in the city of York in 12th century England. She described many details of Jewish life at the time and how she and all the local Jews were forced to wear badges to identify themselves. She also spoke of a terrible massacre of the Jewish population by the townspeople. During this event, she recalled taking refuge with her children in the crypt of a local church, but they were discovered by the mob, and that is where she died. Professor Barry Dobson, an expert in Jewish history at the University of York, was called in to verify the information from this session. He found that the description of Jewish life in the 12th century was impressive in its accuracy. And in fact, he was convinced that some details could only have been known by professional historians. However, it also seemed that some details were completely incorrect. For example, in fact, it was only in the 13th century, in 1215 to be precise, that the church authorities in Rome decreed that Jews in Christian countries had to wear special identification. Secondly, according to his description, the church must have been St. Mary's Castlegate, but that church did not have a crypt. However, further investigation revealed that the practice of requiring Jews to wear an identification badge was already widespread in England in the 12th century before the church's decree. Then, surprisingly, several months later, during the renovation of this church, a sealed chamber was discovered beneath the floor that appeared to have been a crypt, a very rare phenomenon indeed for churches in the region. Thus, not only did his regression provide obscure details that were historically accurate, but it also supplied historical information that certainly should not have been available at that time. And there are hundreds of documented cases of regressive hypnosis showing patients speaking foreign languages, even dead languages, or mentioning historical details known only to specialist historians. This, even if it is not absolute proof, seems to me to be a rather powerful indicator of the existence of past lives. But if you are still not convinced, then we will look at near-death phenomena, but that will be for a future episode.